Hello there everyone, I'm Christina of CSLdesigns and today I'm going to show you how to make these Celtic lace wirework bracelets. And these are the two that I made here just to show you how they can look quite different depending what materials that you choose to put together. So what we achieve is actually adding in beads one at a time, and then along the way of doing that we then combine our wire in a certain way here to achieve this kind of Celtic lacy effect on top of them. So that's the front. Now on the back there's no wire at all, so that means they're going to be nice and comfortable to wear around your wrist. And then it sits a little something like this on the wrist here. So as you can see, that pattern that we make with the wire on top of the beads really give a nice impact, and it's also pretty bold. Now obviously the difference is compared to the other one here, it's a bit more contrasting because of the materials that I chose to put together, but it's completely up to you how you want to combine yours. And you don't even have to use the exact same beads that I'm using here. I just chose these to demonstrate the technique with. So you can use a completely different size and shape, so you can use round ones instead, and also say smaller ones, which I also would recommend to help with just the size. So for instance, because these beads are quite large, so if you want a larger size and you want to add another bead that adds quite a long length, or obviously if you need it smaller than this, and you then take a bead away, that might end up being too short. So that is why I like to use an extended chain, but another way to help that is also by just using a different size beads. So if you say use smaller ones, you have a bit more room to whether you can add or take a bead away. So if you want to learn how to make these bracelets here, it's a pretty simple technique, then just keep watching this tutorial. So these are then the materials that we're going to need. First of all, I had two different gauges of regular round copper wire here. The first gauge is a 1mm. This is going to be the base wire that's running through the whole bracelet. And then here I have a 0.6mm. This is going to be the wire that creates the pattern on top of the beads. So then as for the beads that I'm using, these are some flat oval gemstone beads, and they measure approximately 2.5 by 2 centimeters in the size, but you don't have to use these specifically. I'm just really demonstrating to show you the effect that you can get. For instance, you can easily swap them out with something like this. So this is a flat round bead instead, and also a slightly different size. So it's just really to show you the technique of doing it, and you can really play around with the final effect depending what materials that you use. And then finally here I just have my findings that I'm going to finish off the bracelet with. So I've got my extended chain and lost or claw clasp, and obviously some jump rings as well. So make sure you check out the description box below the video as well. I'm going to have the material list down there and links alongside it. So let's get all the materials ready and let's get started. Then we need some lengths of our wire. So what I have here first of all is the length of our 1mm of about 30 centimeters. So this is going to run through the whole bracelet and be the strength of the piece. And then we need three lengths here of a 0.6mm of about 80 centimeters each, and these are going to be creating the effect on top of the beads. So first of all, what I'm going to do here is grab my base wire, because we need to make a wrap loop first of all on one end that we can then start working from. So to do that, I'm just going to first of all grab my chain nose pliers here and then move up about 5 centimeters or so, just however much you need to make your wrap loop with. And then make a bend in the wire. Bend it back on itself like that. And then I'm going to take my, in this case, 6-step bell making pliers. You can also use round nose pliers, it doesn't really matter. I just like using these because I know I get the exact size loop that I want. And obviously I'm going to use them on the other end as well, so I get the same size. Place them where the bend is, and then bring the tail here back on itself, all the way around the pliers to create a full circle. So something a bit like that there. If you need to adjust it, you can just roll it in a little bit. Then I like to again grab my chain nose pliers and basically hold on to that circle so it doesn't go out of shape, while I then take this tail, wrap it around below the circle there, around this length, coming straight down, which is then what makes the wrap loop part. Wrap it nice and tight and just bring it around a few times, 2 to 3 times or so should be enough. And if you feel like you need to as well, you can always use your pliers to help squeeze your wraps tight. It's a bit hard to get them tight with just your hands. So wrap it around here, just the final time, just a bit like that. Then I'm going to come to the back here where the wire is coming out, and we just need to get rid of the excess. So I'm going to take my flush cutters, cut off the excess wire there, as close to it as I can get. Now what you're going to find is that the little end of the wire is sticking out a little bit, and you can feel it kind of scratching on your finger. So make sure whenever you cut your wire off like that, just going to flip it around here, that we then just squeeze it in. So I take my chain nose again and just tighten it in until we feel like we can't really feel it anymore and it's not scratching on our skin. So obviously we don't want anything to scratch on our skin while we're wearing it, or catch on our clothes for that matter. something like that. And now here we then have the starting point, and also just make sure that the rest of the length here is nice and smoothed out, just so we don't have any obvious kinks in it, because then it'll be kind of hard to get the beads on. Then once we made that wrap loop, we need to take our lengths of 0.6mm and attach them onto the base wire, and I'm just going to take one at a time here. So I'll grab my first length of 0.6mm. Then what we need to do is find the middle, so I put both ends together, just gently, something like that, and then further down here, where the loop is where then the middle of my wire is. So I'm just going to keep hold of that, a bit like this here, and then I'm going to bring in my base wire again, and then down here from where we made the wrap loop, I want to then start attaching my 0.6mm wire. So just put it behind there, and then with one side, just wrap it around the base wire 1 full time so it comes back out to the same side that it was coming out to before, just including a wrap now. And that's now attached. Now it's going to be a little bit loose in the sense it can kind of come up and down quite easily, but it's just really to begin with while everything is still a bit loose. So that's the first one. Attach the remaining 2 of the 0.6mm in the same way, so we have them all stacked on top of each other like this. Then I attached all the wires now, and as you can see, they're stacked on top of each other, and they are going to be loose to be able to move up and down. Don't worry too much about that, just try and keep them down there, just above that wrap loop, and it's going to get easier and more manageable once we do add 1 or 2 beads. It's not going to move around as much. So, like I said, try and have them pushed all the way down, because then what we need to do now is add in the first bead before we can then actually start making the pattern. So, I grab my bead and then go to the end of my wire here, the base wire, just add the bead onto the length and then push it all the way down to sit right on top of all these wires that we wrapped around. And again, you can then use the bead as well to help push them down, make them tighter. So just like that. So now this is going to be a starting point, and we now need to make the first section with the pattern on top of this bead here. So we're going to straight away start using these 0.6mm lengths to do that. So what you're going to find is that you have one length on either side as the bottom one there. That's the same length of wire, and then you have one in the middle and then also one on the top. So what we're going to actually start with is the very bottom wires there. So I'm just going to start in my case with my right side. It doesn't matter what side you start from, I just recommend that you stay consistent. So if you start with the left one, just keep doing that, and then obviously kind of work in a mirrored way to me. But then make sure that we just smooth these wires out before we move them, so that doesn't, any kinks or anything don't go into the actual pattern. I'm going to bring that bottom wire on the right towards the bead and then end up going over it, over to the opposite side. Something a bit like that there. And don't worry about anything being perfect right away, because we can keep adjusting it as we go, as we keep moving our wires around, because they're going to keep moving around as we move other wires as well anyway. So that's now brought over from the right to the left, and it's pretty close down to the bottom of the bead there. Then I'm going to bring the left equivalent wire also over the bead towards the right, and this now goes over the first wire that we brought over first, and then just also bring that down a bit so we kind of get these little curves in the wire, create a nice shape on this end of the bead. I'm going to keep trying to kind of hold it so it's all staying nice and tight together. So what you can do throughout is also try and help adjust your wires with how they sit. So obviously right now I'm using chain nose pliers here. Make sure that when you do that you don't squeeze too hard, because that will make the wire straight. I just kind of like using them to help guide the wire a little bit. Try and get the two sides symmetrical as much as you can. So those two are in place. Now I'm going to go to the right side again. That's the one side we started with. Then I'm going to take the next wire up. This is now the bottom one that we have available. And now bring that also over the bead towards the opposite side, and this goes over the wire that's pointing out to this side here. So just like that, and keep that a little bit more open than the first one, so they kind of slightly stack on top of each other, which is then also what creates that pattern that we want. Now the next one on the left side here, which is the new bottom one on that side, we start to bring that over the bead, but in this case we just need to pay attention, because now we need to start weaving the wires together. So here what you can see is the first wire that's going out to the left side that we already brought over, that one is coming under in this crossover section, so that means this wire that we're bringing now needs to come opposite. So I'm just going to lift up this first wire that's going out to the left side and then bring this new wire that we're moving under it. So basically it's opposite to the previous crossover point, but then it still goes over the next one up. And then just bring it out to the opposite side and try and then get them more or less level there as much as you can, while trying to keep everything pushed down. So we can slowly start to see a pattern emerging now. Now we have 2 wires left, one on either side that we haven't used yet. So I'm going to again start with the right side. And now we need to again intertwine on this side here. So just make sure it's opposite of the previous crossover point. So that means this first wire going out to the right, we actually need to come under it, because previously that wire we brought over actually went over that one at the crossover point. So bring it under and then over the next one, because that's again opposite the previous crossover point on that one, and then over towards the left side, so the opposite side of where it's coming from. And just try and hold it in place, because like I said, while it's all open here, it can move about a little bit. Don't worry too much about that. The last one here on the left side, we also need to do opposite the previous crossover points, making sure we intertwine them. So that means it needs to go over the first one, and then underneath the middle one of those 3 on this left side, and then again over the last one. Now just before I pull it all the way over, just push that bead down again, hold it in place, and then just bring it over towards the right side. So now all the wires are actually intertwined with each other in the pattern that we want. Now it's really just a matter of kind of adjusting this until you're more or less happy with how it looks. So that's what we can do that as well while the wires are loose, because then it gives you more opportunity to move them however you need to. So if you need to tighten anything up, you can push things together. And also this one here, kind of push it up a little bit more. So we kind of get a nice graduation in the piece as well. And again, making sure that the equivalent wires on either side are as even and symmetrical as possible. So you can either push wires in place or you can pull from the opposite side there. Something close to this. It doesn't have to be perfect just yet, because we can still just adjust it, and they will still move as we now need to fasten them on the other side. So I'm just gonna rotate around here. Find it a bit easier to do this next part, kind of holding it to the side like this. Again, before I do anything else, just make sure that that bead is pushed down, so everything is sitting close to that wrap loop. Then we need to start fastening the wires on this side of the bead, so that obviously cages in the bead as well, and we can finalize that pattern. Now what I'm going to start with is the first wires here that are closest to the end, and I'm going to start from the top side. So this one here that's coming close to this base wire first of all from the top, I'm going to start bringing that around behind that base wire, but as I'm doing it, just be mindful of what's going on here in the pattern. So kind of keep adjusting it as I'm bringing it around, because basically this end now we need to make look as similar to the beginning as possible. So we see these ones, the first ones, they're actually the widest ones down here, but they're now going to be the narrow ones up here on this end. Then what I'm going to do is bring it all the way around the base wire one full time, and then it's going to be coming out towards the bottom here. Then we're going to take the bottom one here, that's the furthest closest to the end of the bead. Again, this one was the widest on this side. It's now going to be the narrow and be equivalent to the one that we just wrapped around. So again, make sure we keep an eye on that, and then we start wrapping that around after the wrap that we just did. Just one full complete circle there to come out in the opposite direction to the first one. So just like that. And then we can kind of have a look at this little crossover point and this little section on the end and see how that looks compared to the beginning section. So this is where if you need to open up anything, you can kind of do that a bit now. I want to just push them a little bit further apart here. Just create a little bit more space. Something a bit like that. Then, because I started with the top side when I did these first wraps, I'm going to take the top one next. This one is going to be, kind of say, the middle one. So again, make sure we're looking, everything looks nice along the way, and I'm going to just bring that after the wraps that I've just done, and then do a full wrap with this one as well. So each individual wire gets a full wrap as we're attaching them here, and this now comes straight down, and so far it looks alright. And don't worry too much about it if it's not perfect when we get to the end, because we can still adjust it if we need to. Just try and do it a little bit along the way. Now the bottom one here, that's the next one available closest to the end of the bead. Same principle, equivalent to the one that we just moved. Kind of like to hold my finger on it as well. When I feel like it's got the shape that I want, I hold my finger on it so it stays in place, while I then wrap it around, and this now comes towards the top. So I now have two on either side there. Again, if you need to, you can open anything up a little bit while trying to keep the curves in there to obviously keep the pattern nice looking on top of that bead. So something a bit like that so far. Now the final ones that we have, I'm going to start with the top, and that one we need to make match with the top one on that side there. So bring that around over the others there, and then get it to wrap around after the ones that we've just done. Try and have a look at to make sure it looks as symmetrical as possible, so they kind of align with each other along the top. Then wrap that around to then come downwards. We now have three pointing down. And the final one here on the bottom that we've yet to move, bring that over the others to then come and wrap around. But before we wrap it, just check in how everything looks. And if you need to move anything, I can see I just feel like I need to move some of these wires a little bit, because I want this kind of pattern with these little diamonds or squares in the middle to be more or less in the middle of the bead, just roughly. Something a bit like that. Put my finger on it there. I'm happy with the curves and everything. So I'm coming underneath the base wire and then wrap this all the way around to then come upwards. Just something a bit like that. And there we then have our pattern in place on top of the bead. And now, like I said, you can still do any slight adjustments, which I recommend doing now. So look at the pattern now before you move on to the next bead, because that's when it's easier, because you still, even though you wrap them around there, you still have a bit of movement. Whereas if you need to open anything up, you can do that either using your nails or fingers, or if you need to get in a little bit more with a pair of pliers. Just again, be careful if it's chain nose that you're not making anything too straight. But we still have these nice curves in place. I feel like I need to open that top one up a little bit more. So just really until you're happy with how it looks and as symmetrical as possible. So that is really the pattern on the very first bead here. Then we just want to grab our next bead, because we then need to add that onto our base wire. So I'm just adding one bead at a time here, so it's kind of manageable to work with. Then make it go all the way down to sit after the first one. And then again, you can use the bead to help push them down a bit, so make everything nice and tight. So when you're happy with that first one, we can then move on to then wrap our wires around this second bead now. And it's the same basic principle. I'm just going to show you how to kind of do this one, and then obviously the rest of the bracelet is the same. But it's the same principle in the sense of, we just started down here where the wires were attached from, but we start in the same way. So I take from the bottom, and because I'm starting with my right side, I'm making sure to do that with this second bead again as well. But take the bottom one from the right side, and then bring it over the bead over towards the left side, kind of bring it down pretty close to this end of the bead. Then I take the bottom left one, bring that over towards the right, over the bead, but also over that other length of wire. And then we can just tighten them up a little bit. Now what you can also do is actually use the first bead now as a bit of a guide of where these wires need to sit. So kind of see how tight we need to pull these. So the next one on the right side, the next bottom one there, bring that over the bead and this length of wire now that's going out to this side. Just like that. We're starting to cross them over more now. Now on the left side, it needs to be brought over towards the right, but this is where we need to start intertwining them So the first wire, we need to bring it underneath that. So we can see the crossover point gets opposite of the previous one. And then over the next one. And then just bring it over until it looks symmetrical as possible. And also comparing it to the bottom one down there. And the last one on the right side, we need to bring it, making sure the bead is pushed nice and tight down. We need to bring it underneath the first wire and over the second one, while trying to keep curves in them, so not have any harsh angles or bends, if we can help it. You can kind of see that one got a little bit of a sharper bend down here than I want it to. Just trying to have more of a curve in it, slight curve. But like I said, we can always come back and adjust it a little bit more because it's still loose now. It's easier to adjust it when we start to tighten up on the other end. Now the last one on the left here goes over the first one, then it needs to come underneath the middle one and over the last one. So all the wires now are intertwined again. Bring that down, come tighter towards the others so we can start to see that shape happening. So something a bit like that. And now I'm going to flip my piece around again, just so it feels a bit more comfortable to hold on to and work with. And now this is where we just need to make sure that as we start tightening these, that we're then happy with how they sit. So I'll start with the top one that's closest to this end of the bead, and then it seems to sit pretty nice and a nice curve in there. Wrap that around just a single full time to then come straight down, and then the closest one on the bottom side here. Again, double checking the curve and how everything is sitting. Bring that underneath the base wire to then wrap around to come towards the top. Gradually getting there. And we still then have that space. Look at that compared to the first side of the bead there. And then the next one on the top, we bring over the other one there and then start to bring that around that base wire, just double checking how it's sitting compared to this first side. Do a full wrap here to come straight down. Make sure you keep these wraps nice and tight together as well. And the next one that's available on the bottom, we bring that over the others there. Make sure we keep a bit of a curve in it. To then wrap it around a full time and come straight up. And it's slowly starting to emerge the pattern there. The final one on the top is going to be the widest ones as well. Bring that over the other wires that we just wrapped on that side. Make sure we keep a curve in the place in that wire, and that they're pretty much level on the top side there. Put your finger on it and then wrap it around a full time to come straight down. Push that wrap nice and tight. So we now have 3 wires straight down there towards the bottom. The final one on the bottom here that needs to come all the way around, go over the other wires and then underneath the base wire. We're just double checking how it looks and then see if we need to just adjust anything. I feel like I just need to push some of these a little bit closer or further apart just to make it as symmetrical as possible. Need to push it a little bit closer to the other there. And then when I'm happy with it, I can wrap that around as well one full time and have it come straight up. And that is now the second bead wrapped. And like I said, double check it now. If you need to make any adjustments, do that while we're just by this bead, because these can still be slightly adjusted, opened up or pulled tighter. And then once you've done that, you just add your next bead, do the same, and you keep repeating that until you have the length that you want. Now that I then kept going, then I reached the end and I've added my very final bead there in the exact same way, wrapped the wires around there as well, just like I showed you before. So then what I want to do now is actually finish off these wires. So after I wrap them around just like the other times, I'm just going to flip it around to the back. And then because we've already wrapped them around, all I can go in and do here is actually just cut them off. And I just like to do one at a time. So it's wrapped around and I'm going to cut it off here towards the back. Just using my flush cutters to just separate them a little bit here to get my flush cutters in there. Just like that. Cut off the excess. And there's just a tiny little tail left, so if you go over it with your finger you can probably feel it. So to make sure we get rid of that, just going to take my chain nose and make sure to squeeze it down. And basically keep kind of wrapping it around a bit. So it still continues to wrap. We just make sure to flatten it down, just so it doesn't stick out and catch on any skin while we wear it there on the wrist. And then that's the first one. Then I take the very next one. Like I said, I just like doing one at a time. And I just work from the bottom there up. Just cut off the next one on the opposite side. And then go in again and squeeze that down as well. And you literally just do this with all of them until you don't have any more of these 0.6mm lengths left. When you've then gotten rid of all those wires there, all this have to do is finish off the base wire as well. So you use this length to also just make a wrap loop in the exact same way as we did in the beginning. Now obviously it's just to finish it off. So just make that wrap loop to finish off the bracelet there, and then all this have to do is attach our findings and then shape it. Now I finished off my bracelet here, and I've also attached my clasp on one end and the extender chain on the other end. Then to shape it here, what I like to do is use my hands and fingers. So I like to go in and start putting a curve into it. So I don't just go into one place and put a big bend, because that'll put it out of shape. But what I do is gradually put a curve into it. Obviously we can't shape the beads, so you just want to gradually get a curve into it, the wire that's running through. Obviously with the actual pattern there of the wire facing outwards away from it. So that's what we can see on the wrist when we start to wear it. But then we just want to gradually get the ends here closer and closer together. So we can then obviously use the clasp to just keep going like this back and forth, gently putting that curve into it until you achieve the shape that you want. Now then finish shaping it here and it's ready to wear. And we can just use the clasp, which is going to make it nice and secure as well as we're wearing it. And then it looks a little something like this. So we achieve this almost Celtic lacy effect on top of the beads there, with how we intertwine the wires. But the beads themselves are still showing through as well, so the colour will show through. And then you get that really nice effect. Now this is the one that I showed you how to make. Another one that I made as well was using these materials. Just again to show you a different kind of look that you can achieve. This is using more contrasting materials, so the darker beads against that silver wire, so it really makes it stand out nicely. But obviously you can completely combine yours however you want to. So I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial here. Now if you don't want to miss any future tutorials from me, make sure you subscribe to my channel and also turn on the notification bell. But thank you so much for watching this one, and I'll see you in the next one.